Hi, folks. Welcome to the SIG for the 24th of June 2025. As is the norm in these calls, is there anybody available to take meeting notes? That'd be awesome.
I can take notes.
Thank you, Emily. Then the first question that normally comes up is number one, a quick recap of what happened in the last meeting from somebody who attended, which I'm hoping that will also be Emily. And then check through to see if we've got anything on the agenda items. I checked earlier on today, I didn't see anything listed. And then an open call for topics to be discussed and I guess follow-on discussions. I did briefly check the meeting notes and I see that last time there was a discussion on long-term support and what that really means and some refinement on that. But Emily, maybe you could give us a quick update.
Yeah, I think the majority of that last meeting was just going through and kind of adding our 2 cents to that LTS document. I think I need to open that document back up, but the highest order bits that I remember and things that were unique did have to do with considering, and this was more just for demo purposes, how we treat Windows. I think in this group sometimes there is a tendency to do Windows, why should any tool chain work out of the box for Windows? But for demos, it can be particularly important. That's just the one thing that's coming to mind. Otherwise, if we could just do a quick review of the LTS document, I can go into more specifics, but I don't have it up right now.
I think I just stuck the link into the
Perfect.
chat.
Yeah, so I think the only other thing that came out was just, maybe trying to embed, at least whether it's in the LTS itself or documentation around the LTS, a very clear message on what the goals of future compatibility with WASI standards ever are. Just, is the goal that at some point we could achieve compatibility with P2, P3, 1.0? Is that an explicit non-goal? Ironing that out. I think that was the other thing that came out of that discussion.
Yeah.
But that was pretty much it. It was a small group.
Okay, cool. All right, then let's have a quick look at the agenda items, see if any other PRs have been submitted in the 10 minutes since I last checked. Nothing new there. Okay, so we don't have anything fixed on the agenda to talk about. We do have this document, which is probably worth a discussion. Does anybody have any burning issues or things they would like to bring up in this week's meeting? Silence, I think. Okay, so probably worthwhile sharing the document to go through it in a little bit more detail and use some of the time today to do that. And then there has been a lull in progress on the LTS. I'm aware of that. Some of the questions that I've seen recently were things like well, I guess there's a couple of things coming up that were kind of interesting over the last couple of weeks. So there was a discussion in Germany about where the component model fits in the overall wider ecosystem, and the corporate interests of the folks who are driving it. So we can see great value in cloud edge computing, but that's not a general computing environment and doesn't need to bring in support for legacy and existing software to the same degree that the embedded SIG does, or even that the web does. The interests of Google in particular are supporting and bringing as many applications to the web as an execution environment as possible. But that's not the same goal for some of the cloud edge use cases, where it's more of a dedicated cloud edge use case. And there's a need to not have general compute there, but to have a limited set of functionality available, which ironically looks more like embedded software, really. But on the embedded side, we do see a lot of use cases where there's a need to provide support for bringing legacy code over to these platforms. And it's the reason why you see real-time operating systems adopting a POSIX-like API. It's not full POSIX, but it's a subset of it, somewhat compatible. And the reason for it is just to lower the cost of bringing software to those platforms, which is why it exists. This is very similar to what you see with I guess, Preview 1 in the web, right? Let's do what we can to lower the cost of bringing software to it. So it does bring up like a different set of design goals for it, and a different approach for it. And one of the questions that came up subsequent to that conversation in Germany was, hey, if I'm doing a GPIO or I2C interface, should I do it with a component model if that's really being deployed in an environment right now that is only ever going to see production use cases in a cloud edge style environment? Because they don't need the GPIO and I2C interface. So should I? Or should I not target that initially? So that I think some of our colleagues from Collins Aerospace were on the call for that conversation recently as well. So that came up, and I think Emily, to the point, you know, how does it intersect with the component model and the future standard? That's a good point. I guess the work that's going on to prove out the component model as a concept is really focused on a specific set of use cases right now, where there isn't a need for this general compute at the moment. I'm guessing that will change once things are ironed out, but I guess we should also have a longer term alignment sketch also from the component model folks. I know I saw Luke on the call earlier, and Andrew, I don't know if they still are, but it would be good to get that done. I mean, looking at what verticals it's initially going to attack in the market would be really useful. And then we can map our goals to align with it when it gets to the verticals that we're interested in. So I don't know if it's been done from that point of view, but what came out of the conversations in Germany was that might be a really interesting thing to do. Look at like.
So this is Merrill Harmon from Schneider. So we are looking more towards hard real time, as close as we can get to it. And for networking, threading, these kinds of things, the POSIX push is good. The component model with the lifting and lowering seems like it's going to be a challenge for that. I think we need direct access to this kind of stuff rather than going through a component model type interface with that, because I think that's going to cause too much latency non-determinism. I like the path that I've been talking with Stephen a bit, and I like the path that it seems to have been taking without going towards the component model, because I think that's going to be necessary for our harder real-time stuff that we're trying to push towards.
Yeah, I think we're very much on the same boat there, which is why I was trying to suggest looking at this from a market vertical point of view. Cloud edge being one, and one set of customers and use cases that come with it. But then looking at, is the component model going to target other verticals? And when in its roadmap and stability point would it get to that point that we could then look to align with it? In the meantime, totally, I think it's a POSIX non-component model effort right now for the LTS. But that might be a request for consideration during the next plumbers meeting, perhaps.
Mm.
I don't expect anybody to have the answers right now. It's just a way of looking at the problem, but I think it's something we could try and provoke a conversation around where that makes sense. In the meantime, yeah, I would say let's hold off on the alignment. I'd say it's a to-do item because we would need to have a really deep conversation around it with the component model team too, to find out how that would work. There is a whole bunch of work going on in the W3C community group. Thomas Lively was presenting on it most recently, and some other Google employees have presented on it. And it also came up at a Darkstar event in Germany. Folks in academia are looking at it, and it's cross-language interoperability. The academic approach is using some form of formal verification for this, and the Google approach is using in-memory representations and trying to get conformance between JavaScript and WebAssembly, which is kind of interesting. And I think a lot of those approaches could offer in-memory representations without the lifting and lowering and the copying potentially in the future. And that stuff would make the component model, all the performance concerns we have around that for hard real time, potentially in the future, which is really exciting. Unfortunately, I'm not the expert on those. The guys are, and the academic partners are, but and I think it was a question that we raised at the last one of the last W3C WebAssembly core meetings was, it would be a really interesting thing to see some of the folks working on the component model working more closely with the Google folks and with the academic partners here to see what could be done. That'd be really, really cool because it would sort of melt away some of those concerns that we see. But again, that kind of depends on the honestly on the corporate interests of the folks funding that research right now. And I know they've got a cloud platform to build, so it might not be on the research agenda longer term, but that's certainly something for the Plumber Summit, I think, to next opportunity to really get everybody together in the Bytecode Alliance and talk about it. So, but I have no clear answers on that one right now. I think the goals for LTS are, it's good to have those sketched out. Ultimately, it's stability in the compiler, toolchain, and runtime. There was some confusion around the line 1 stuff. I think we discussed it recently. Changes to the compiler and turning on options in the Clang compiler and the toolchain for WASI. It has caught us out before by us. I mean, the Royal embedded us, not just Siemens. I think Marcin at Amazon got caught out when reference types were turned on and just wasn't aware it was coming. So there is some communication issues there. So I think part of doing the LTS is taking control of the compiler toolchain and the runtime together. So we have stability around the platform, and we can secure that part of the software supply chain. That looks at a bit of investment. There's a couple of ways of approaching this. There is a development commitment from participating companies to do it, and there is partnering with somebody who is really good at doing this. So I apologize, Luke. I haven't been looking at the screen, and you must have had your hand up for ages. Sorry, just shout over the top of me. I apologize.
Yeah, well, first, just to comment on the two Google approaches you mentioned, or the academic and the Google approach. The academic one involves using really high-level super typed languages, not unsafe languages, so it just rules out C entirely, so probably not applicable to the embedded use case where you want to run existing like C code. So that's the richly typed WASM I assume you're talking about. So only works with like functional languages or like, safe Rust. And then the Google thing you're talking about is the JS built-ins. That's dependent on WASM GC, and also it's tied to JavaScript semantics and assumes you're embedded in a JS engine, which I assume also rules it out for like embedded use cases where you probably don't have an embedded JS engine, because then we're in a totally different ballgame. So tell me if you're thinking about a third thing, though.
No, so what I was thinking about was these things aren't directly addressing our problems right now, but are there concepts we can borrow from this and then reapply? So the things like if we've got control of the compiler and we wanted to add some additional information into what happens when a malloc occurs, so you can describe that object in memory, you could turn that on. There are perhaps concepts in there that we could borrow, and that would be interesting.
Well, we definitely work closely with both Amal and Group, which is richly typed WASM. They actually have done some work on the component model. One of their PhD students is interested in working on formalizing it. And we talk a lot with the Googlers. And, if you look, there's recent work to have lifting and lowering, be able to lift and lower into WASM GC. So that would, be able to interoperate with all that WASM GC stuff. So we definitely interoperate with it. But we don't want to, build in, one of the goals is don't assume GC, make sure, linear memory languages work well. So getting to the earlier point, there's no goal to scope this to just edge and cloud computing. These are simply some of the initial places where there's high value from WASM as it is today. The goal is to run all the existing POSIX software without having to change it to be source compatible. What's helpful in these discussions is not to talk in abstract concepts, but to come up with specific issues. And I'm definitely aware of some. We have a list of them. The realloc is a thing, and we've got a plan to solve it. It just hasn't gotten to the front of the priority queue. We know zero copy into and out of linear memory from host is a thing. And that's what streams we're actively working on and finalizing to ship that will solve that. We actually have some fast internal use cases that need that exact same zero copy, super high bandwidth network, copying into and out of linear memory. They want the same thing. So that one is being addressed even sooner. So if you have anything additional, what's good is to talk about concrete problems, but our goal is to be able to support these hard real-time environments. And I'm not aware of, other than a small set of things that we've mostly already talked about, what are other outstanding issues. It's just mostly an effort of work and getting people to work on these projects.
I think it's the timeline for overlapping comes down to not a lack of desire to do it, and not just the identification of the technical problems, but just to be the honest reality that all of the participants in all of these groups have their own agendas for what they need to do commercially to achieve success. And it's important that everybody's successful and that they hit those milestones. And that's going to impact timelines for interoperability for when things get delivered and where it's important, and also where folks need to step up and add extra support. And that's when, you look at the LTS stuff, it's like, well, when will we intersect? That's a good question. I don't know. I know there's corporate interest there. There's probably gaps where there should be, calls to action, where we should ask people to, if this is important to you, you need to step up here and contribute. But also a realistic view on when that might be. I don't have the answer to that, but it might be an interesting conversation for the Plumbers Summit. I mean, we shouldn't dwell on it here because we can't answer it, but it's a joint conversation for the institutions involved in sponsoring the work, right?
Yeah. Well, just as an ask going into that Plumber Summit, then if people have concrete things that they want to talk about, specific technical limitations that they're hitting. Also, for the record, I do think WASI-PL and LTS is a great idea. So if you're saying, my suggestion is when does it intercept? It's whenever that LTS runs out of its long-term support. It's the next.
Yeah.
It could be the next one.
Yeah. So that's really also a scoping exercise for LTS, because the intersection question is really how long are we going to do this project for? It comes down to the length of time we provide support in LTS for the first release of it, and then what's the overall LTS lifetime, right? So that's a good question too. And then there are options that there are ways and means we can fund the LTS going forward. One of the concepts we had was having member companies donate developer time and resources to it. The other concept was to see if there was an organization who is really good at doing LTS type stuff and would be interested in doing it and basically leading that effort. And if that happened, then we would presumably pay them to do the work instead of contributing resources ourselves. So some of that has led to like initial discussions with Red Hat and Wind River. You guys interested in this? Is this something you might like to take on? There's no answer to that right now. It's just general awareness that this is something that's coming that we need to try and staff and maintain. Yeah, I mean, there's different ways and means of achieving the same goal, and the goal is just stability. So, but that's all the additional news beyond that document that I had to share, really. That's it from me. So looking at the document, we do need to put a bit of effort into structuring it and moving it along. I think there is a task there for us to do try and get that knocked into a shape that could be more widely distributed. That's something that I can take on this week and commit to getting done for Friday, and we can have a more up-to-date version for the next meeting to discuss. My approach to this is to I think it's very hard to discuss about a blank sheet of paper, and it's much easier to discuss when you have somebody who has an opinionated view that you disagree with from an internal politics and discussing point of view. So I will go through that document and try and sort of formalize the text a little bit more, and I will take the notes that are in it right now, convert them. And if there's any ambiguity, I will attempt to take a strong stance, but hold it extremely lightly. So if you don't agree, shout and we'll change it. But I'm just going to put it in there as a discussion point. I might highlight it for the next SIG meeting where we can discuss it in a bit more detail. But that's the approach I'm going to do, just to try and drive the document along so we don't spend ages looking at the same Google document and we actually make a bit of progress. That's it. Unless anybody has anything else to talk about, I think we can wrap it up. Magic. Then I will hit the stop recording button. Wherever that happens to be. Where did that go? Oh my goodness, somebody's gonna have to tell me whether the non-stop recording button is and these things. I'm a Teams user, always find Zoom really confusing.
It should hover somewhere at the top of your screen. I can never find it.
Right.
Like an